Lesson 1-5, solving proportions. First up, we want to look at what a proportion is. A proportion is an equation stating that two ratios are equivalent. You can solve equations involving proportions by using the multiplication property of equality. And again, the multiplication property of equality just states that whatever you multiply, if two sides are equal, whatever you multiply on one side, multiply it on the other. And you'll notice that you can also write it as a division problem. So if you divide by one number, you divide by the same side. You have equal sign in between two ratios. That's really what you're doing. You have two ratios equal to each other, and you're solving for the missing variable. So an example, solve the proportion, if necessary, round to the nearest hundredth. So that's telling you, you might have to round it to 2 decimal places. The most common method when you have ratios equaling each other is use cross multiplication. So if I do that, I would have x times 25, which is 25x, equaling 45 times 15, and 45 times 15 would give us 675. Now all I have to do is just get x by itself, and I can divide this by 25 on both sides. And I have 675 divided by 25, and I'm left with x equaling 27. Now that is not a decimal, but it just said if necessary. Now this is one way of solving it. Now what are ratios? Ratios are really just another way of writing a fraction. So if I have x over 45, I can reduce this problem right here, 15 over 25. I can reduce this by dividing this by 5/5, and now we get 3/5. So if I think x over 45 equaling 3/5, and I think, what do I multiply 5 by to get 45? Well, 5 times 9 gives me 45. Whatever I do in the denominator, I must do in the numerator. So that means 3 times 9 would give us 27. So that's just another way of writing that. Next one, solve n minus 4 over 8 equaling 3/2, if necessary, round to the nearest hundredth. Now this one, I look at my denominators or I look at my numerators. If I find that the numbers work well with each other, and when I say worked well with each other, that means I can multiply it by a constant and get one of those numbers, I'm going to use that method. So I'll show you two methods here, and then you get to choose which method would you prefer using to solve. So I know right now that 2 times 4 is going to give me 8. And if 2 times 4 gives me 8, that means 3 times 4 has to give me n minus 4. So I'm going to do n minus 4 equals 3 times 4. And 3 times 4 is 12. So now I have n minus 4 equaling 12. To get n by itself, I just add 4 to both sides, and I'm left with n equals 16, which is choice A. That is one method. The other method is what we did in our last one. I have two ratios equal to each other. I just cross multiply. So I have 2 times n minus 4 equaling 8 times 3. Here I'm just going to distribute the 2. Actually, now I'm going to distribute the 2 right here. So I'm just going to write 2 times n minus 4 equaling 24. I need to get the parentheses by itself, so I'm going to divide by 2 here. And I'm left with n minus 4 equals 12. Now if I add 4 to both sides, I now have n equals 16. This is the same as what I had before, it's just a little bit different route to get there. Now let's just say I did distribute here. There's nothing wrong with distributing. I can distribute and I get 2n minus 8 equaling 24. I would just add 8 to both sides and I would get 2n equaling 32. Divide by 2 and I would still get n equaling 16. There's just a few more steps involved with it, But again, you have multiple options of solving that one. Next, solve this one. I noticed that none, like 2 times a constant, like an integer, does not give me 5. So this one, I am going to cross multiply. So I'm going to have 5 times 8 minus x equaling 2 times 13. Here I have, this is going to be 26. I know I can't divide 5 evenly with 26, so I'm just going to distribute. And I have 40 minus 5x equaling 26. So I'm going to subtract 40 on both sides, and I'm left with negative 5x equaling 26 minus 40 gives us negative 14. To get x by itself, I just divide by negative 5, and I would have x equaling 14 fifths. Now it says, if necessary, round to the nearest hundredths, so 2 decimal places. Negative 14 fifths, so 14 divided by 5 is 2.8. There is only 1 decimal place, so this would be my answer. I would just be, if the question doesn't say how to write your answer, whatever your teacher says to write your answer, write it that way. For me, it doesn't matter as long as you don't round anything off unless it asks you to round it. I usually keep it as a fraction, but if you prefer as putting it as a decimal, then put it as a decimal. Next, here I'm going to cross multiply. So now I have 24x equaling, and now I have to multiply 9 times 2x minus 3. I'm going to distribute the 2, so I have 24x equaling 18x minus 27. To get x's to one side, I'm going to subtract 18x, and I'm left with 6x equaling a negative 27. The x by itself, I divide by 6, and I'm left with x equaling negative 27/6. I can divide this by 3/3, and I get negative 9 halves, or a negative 4.5. Here you notice that it says to the nearest tenth, which would be 1 decimal place. Next one, solve this one. Here is a multiple choice problem on this one. Here I'm just going to cross multiply, so I have 18x equaling, the other direction I got 12 times 2x minus 5. Distribute to get rid of my parentheses, so I have 18x equaling 24x minus 12 times 5, it gives you 60. I'm going to subtract 24x on both sides. Now I'm left with negative 6x equaling a negative 60. Divide by negative 6, x would equal a positive 10. And a positive 10 would be choice D. Next, cross multiply again. So I'd have 9 times 2x minus 5 equaling 4 times 4x plus 3. Distribute, and I got 18x minus 45 equals 16x plus 12. Get my x's to one side, so I'm going to subtract 16, and I'm going to add 45. That gives me 2x equaling 57. If I divide this in half, x would give us 57 divided by 2 gives us 28.5. And it does say to the nearest tenth, but the exact answer is 28.5. Example 3 with word problems says parts of Mexico City are sinking at a rate of 140 centimeters every 5 years. If this rate remains constant, how many centimeters will the city sink in the next 12 years? So the first thing we need to do is write our proportions. So we're going to use C for centimeters. And so we're going to do centimeters to years equaling centimeters to years. So the rate is 140 centimeters for every 5 years. So if I did 140 centimeters for 5 years, we need to find out what is the, if this rate remains constant, how many centimeters will there be in the next 12 years? So I set up my ratios and now I have my proportions here. And I'm just going to cross multiply. So I have 5c equals 140 times 12 gives us 1,680. Now I'm just going to put this up here. So we had 5c equaling 140 times 12. You can see by itself, I just divide by 5. So 1680 divided by 5. C would be, or this number of centimeters would be 336 centimeters. Now, if you've got a really small number and it says that it keeps the sinking rate continues to get bigger and bigger, if you get a smaller answer, your answer would not make sense to the problem. So that'd be one way you can double check that. Next, Oscar makes fruit punch to sell from his food truck by mixing 8 parts apple, 3 parts cranberry juice to 3 parts pineapple juice. How many cups of pineapple juice would Oscar need to mix with 48 cups of cranberry juice to make his punch? So I would do cranberry is to pineapple as cranberry is to pineapple. So I'm just setting up my ratios so I have my proportions. So I have 8 parts cranberry juice to 3 parts pineapple juice. Same as how many cups of pineapple juice, so P, would I need to mix with 48 cups of cranberry juice. So solve for P. So now I can just do cross multiplication. So I have 8P equals 48 times 3. So 8P equals 48 times 3 gives us 144. Divide by 8. 144 divided by 8 gives us, you would need 18 parts pineapple juice. Next, Sophia is saving money for down payment on a car. She saves $270 every 5 weeks. Use the proportion to find out how much money Sophia will have saved after 1 year. So we have weeks and we have year. We need to have them as the same ratio. So there are 51 year is the same as 52 weeks. Okay, so now if I do money over weeks equals money over weeks, now I can solve this. So now I have $270 for 5 weeks is the same as how much money, I'm going to use M for money, when I have 52 weeks. And I just cross multiply, so I have 5M equaling 270 times 52. 270 times 52 gives us 1,440 equals 5M. Divide by 5, I would have, or she would have, $2,808 saved up in 1 year. Next part is just dealing with surveys. So we're doing an estimation from a sample survey. So a survey is a research method for gathering responses about characteristics, opinions, or behaviors. Often only a portion or a sample of the population is used to represent the entire population. Just because you won't be able to get every single person to take the survey, so you just get a sample of people that you want to get a survey of. You can use proportions with sample survey data to estimate populations, means, or percentages. Data from surveys are sometimes recorded with a margin of error. That indicates the values below and above the sample statistics between which the actual population value may fall. So that's very similar to absolute value. To our question, the American Veterinarian Medical Association surveyed Floridians about pet ownership. Of the respondents, so those who responded to the survey, 24% reported that their household owns a cat. Cat owners had an average number of 1.8 cats per household with a margin of error of plus or minus 0.1. That means 0.1 above or 0.1 below. If there are 7.8 million households in Florida, about how many pet cats are there in the state? To solve this one, we're going to use this table here. It says we're going to multiply the number of households by the number of cats per household to find the estimated number of cats in the state. So the number of households. So if we go back to our problem, it says number of households, there are 7.6 million households in Florida. So the number of households, that would be 7.6. Multiply that by the number of cats per household. The number of cats per household, if we go back to here, we would have, and we take into consideration the plus or minus, so that the average is 1.8. So if we take, well, 0.1 above and below, we would have 1.7. And this one would be 7.6 times 1.9. Let me go back to this first part, the number of households. So only 24% took that. So we need to find out 24% of the 7.6 million who took the survey. So if I did on my calculator 0.24 times 7.6, I'm now left with 1.824. So that would be here 1.824. That's the number of households, the average number of households. So now if I take that 1.824 times 1.7, estimated, we're going to round these to, actually we won't round any of these, we'll just put the whole decimal, so that would give us 3.1008. And if we took our same answer, our 1.824 times 1.9, that's going to give us 3.4656. So the actual number of pet cats in Florida can be estimated to be between 3.1 million and 3.5 million. Next, in a recent survey conducted by the American Veterinary Medical Association, about 40.1% of households in the survey own a dog. The survey had a margin of error of about plus or minus 0.6. If there are 128.6 million households in the U.S., estimate the range of U.S. households that own a dog. So for this one, it's very similar. It's just one step is a little bit different here. They're giving us the percent of households in there who own a dog, and it says they give us a percentage as your margin of error. So if I take 40.1% and I add 0.6% to it, that would give us 40.7%. And if I did 40.1% minus 0.6%, that would give us 39.5%. So these are the percentages we're going to use. So to find what is the range, so if I have 40.7% of, so times 128.6 million. So on my calculator, I'm going to put in the decimal. So 0.407 times 128.6. That's going to give us 52.3 million. I'm just going to round it to one decimal place. And then the other one, we're going to do 39.5% times 128.6. So on my calculator, I'm going to put 0.395 times 128.6. And that's going to give me roughly 50.8 million. So we can say between 50.8 and 52.3 million people in Florida own a dog. So that is our lesson today on solving proportions.